So, again, thank you, Tammy, for setting this all up, having this. It was a big surprise to me. It's such a nice thing. Thank you so much. And to Seb, the way you explained it to me. I wish he was here to thank him personally. I'll thank him later. So thank you, Tammy. And thank you everyone who's here. I know each of every one of you individually, and now you're all here in one place looking at me, and you know, I'm that guy that you sometimes can become annoying with, but you know, I know I'm a little over the top sometimes. So thank you for putting up with me all these years, but there'll be more on that later in the speech. So where did this all begin for me? I grew up in a housing project, a low-income housing project. There were 5 buildings taking up one big block. Each building had 49 families in Union City. Now, for those of you who don't know, Union City, where I live there, it might still be the truth, is the 3rd most densely populated city in the United States. So you can imagine people on top of people on top of people in this place. So this is where I grew up, in a low-income housing project. We didn't have a garage. We didn't have a basement. We didn't have a workbench. We were very limited with just an apartment. So my parents, my mom was a forever optimist, funny, life of the party. My dad, logical, neat, always told me how to do things neatly, orderly, well-planned, and he also taught us how to read music and play instruments. So those are my parents, and you can see I have a little of both of them with me. I try to be that. So my dad had this thing. He was in the Navy, and he was a radio man in World War II, all Morse code. And he had a little general knowledge of electronics, but very, very brief. So he had this thing called, on his shelf in his closet, an upside down cover from an old phonograph that you would slide off and take off, upside down and filled with things, and he called it the electronics tray. So that was my, like, when I would heard, like we were eating dinner, and he says, after dinner we're going to take down the electronics tray and we're going to work on it. We are? Oh my God, right. I lit up. That was my thing. I loved it. He had needle nose pliers and a soldering iron and basic things like that. But I just loved it. It was my thing. I was the kid at 7 years old that if somebody had something that didn't work, they gave it to me. I fixed it. I took it apart, figured out how it worked, and fixed it. Sometimes I'd have a few screws left over. I don't know where it was. I did fix it. And I kept that coming. People would bring stuff to me all the time. There was a time when there was a guy from the telephone company trying to fix a problem. He was there 2 hours. He left, couldn't do it. I said, Mom, let me take a look. 15 minutes, I had to go. I just had that. Electronics was my thing. So, again, I didn't have a place to practice tools. Hi, Seb. Thank you, Seb. Thank you. Thank you, Seb. So I didn't have tools. I didn't have all that stuff to practice with growing up. So I ended up working for a place called the Morning Star Art Center in high school. So all of my classes were in the morning. In the afternoon, I had free to go work at this place. And you could picture the Ghostbusters firehouse only turned into an art center. And that's what it was. On the first floor, we had pottery, dance on the second floor, photography, guitar lessons. You've heard of the musical group Spyro Gyra. There's a lead guitarist. His name is Julio Fernandez. He taught guitar there. He's a friend of mine. So I worked at this place. After high school, I stayed there. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't go to college right away. All of my other friends went to college, and I didn't want to go to college just to go to college. I wanted to go with something I knew I liked. I wasn't sure yet. So I learned all these practical things like carpentry, plumbing, and using tools, and painting and stuff. We did everything there. Clean toilets, mop, sweep, whatever had to be done. Mix chemicals, mix clay. So I learned a lot of information working there. So I decided to go to electronics school, and that was a great thing. I went there with the idea, I am going to suck in every little thing I know they're teaching me. And I got great marks there. I got straight A's when I went there. It was the right fit for me. Brian, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so electronics is my thing. Love it. So now I get out of school. During which I was at school, I met the woman that would become my wife. I began working and got married, had a son, started college a month before this guy was born, and I did all of it at night. It took many years, but I had that wanting to get it done, and I got an associate's degree all in the evening, and it took a long time, but I had the drive to want to get that. So I did that at the same time, being married, child, bought a house, working full-time. It wasn't easy, but I had that. So I've worked 43 years in the electronics. I started in '82 when I left the Reds Electronics School. And these are all the places I've worked, and I'll tell you what they are. X-Scribe Pengad, that's the place I worked where I was a field service person, and their product was a microcomputer that would take stenographer's paper, read it, and turn it back into text so you can edit it in a file. And I would go to different courthouses and fix their computers. So I lasted there about 3 months, and I was like, that's not for me. Then I went to Crestron. When at the Crestron that I worked, though, it was a small little place in Crest Hill, 101 Broadway, before the big thing that took place at Crestron now. And it was a very small place, and I worked at all kinds of things there. Digital, analog. I got my first taste of RF, which was incredible. Moving a transistor down on a board, 1 millimeter, went from 25 microvolt sensitivity to 5, just by moving it that much down on the board. Changed how well that worked. RF was so cool. So I worked there, I don't know, 8 months, and then that's the time I was getting married, and my wife at the time, well, you know, we need better benefits, because being a Crestron, he advertised 2 sick days, paid sick days. That meant 2 for the year. So we need better benefits. So I ended up going to Singer Kierfot, which was a defense contractor, and that's when I first started working in the engineering department. I was an engineering assistant, and I really liked it there. I liked working with that kind of thing. I started to find where I would do best. So that worked out really well. Then there were budget cuts in the defense system, and I was laid off. I was laid off 4 times in my life. That was the first one, right there. Come on in. Hello. Liliana, hi. Good to see you. So, I was laid off, and I worked for this little place called Varityper. They did desktop publishing. It was rough. I only worked there to have a job. There were people getting stabbed in the stock room. It was rough. So now, one of the guys I worked with at Singer Kierfot left and went to work at Datascope in Paramus. And I didn't know the whole story until later, but what he did was, there was a guy there named Steve Petralia who moved out of a position to take another one in the company, and my friend Mike Bigala, if you remember that guy, he took the job. Then he told me when I was laid off, oh, I'm gonna move into another position, maybe you'll take my job. So I did, I got the job, and that's where I met Carl, and then the next year I met Tony. And for those of you, I mean, you guys know, for those of you who look at me and go, you know, Dennis, you could be a little over the top, right? Well, you don't know what I was like when I was like 29. These guys do. There's a big difference, right? Not a big difference, but, you know, I was crazy, but I wasn't nuts, okay? I was a little bored, so I got into little things, you know, anyway, turkey ticket, yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of liking the engineering thing. And they had a thing where they had displayed jobs. And I kept looking there, and I'm like, you know, I don't mind fixing stuff. And then, you know, my job was to take something, figure out what's wrong, call the customer up. I'd say, your estimate is $1,400. Whoa, that's a lot. Like, how much is the new one? $6,000. Oh, go ahead, fix it. Okay. Yeah. So you'd fix it, burn it in, clean it up, bag it up, and start another one. So, you know, it's a little too, like, for me. So I looked around, I found a job at Philips over in Mawa, and that was pretty cool. It was in engineering, and they did electron microscopes and spectrometers. we did a science project that was a spectrometer. The teacher was like, what's that? So it was pretty cool. I stayed there like 7 years until the boss decided, I was like, I think I should get more money for this. He goes, I agree, but he never did anything about it. So I looked around, I found another place called Dialogic, which was telecom in Parsippany. And that place was awesome. It really was a great place. I worked there 3 years, and then Intel bought them. And I worked for Intel 2 years. And then the telecom industry went like that, and Intel laid everybody off. So now I'm laid off, second time now. And then by the way, every time you get laid off, if you get laid off, don't worry about it. The young people, if you get laid off, don't worry about it. I worried about it, and people told me don't worry about it. Because what ends up happening is, you will find a job, and oftentimes the job you find was better than the job you had. But if you chose to look, you wouldn't have looked around, so you're forced now. Sometimes it works out like that, just so you know. Anyway, so I'm laid off. I ended up working for Jersey Central Power and Light in Morristown, directing electrical trucks to go and fix electric wires and stuff. It was so cool. It was so powerful, no pun intended, but in the same room, this controlled the entire state of New Jersey. You could walk over to a computer, go, boop, and you'd shut the substation off at Lincoln Park. Like, bang, bang, it shuts off. It was so powerful. But the people who go up on those trucks and fix electricity, would you want to go up there on a day like today? Yeah, it's just high voltage. What if you go up there when it's snowing, and it's icy, and it's raining? I give a lot of those people a lot of credit. So I had to deal with customers, I had to direct guys with the over the air through the, through their radios and tell them where to go and what to do. So I did that for about 6 months, and I was looking for a job. All right, moving along. I'm there. I get a call from somebody who saw my resume on Monster.com. Gene Ben Moha. If that name rings a bell with anybody who worked in 800 MacArthur Boulevard, Gene Ben Moha was the talent search person. She goes, wow, hey, I saw your name, I saw your thing on Monster.com. You're perfect for the job. Let me tell you about the company. It's called Datascope. And I'm thinking, you didn't read my resume. Okay, so I didn't say anything. Well, I ended up getting the job. And that's when I came to patient monitoring in 2003. And I worked for Richard Coffin, right? All right, so, anyway, it was good. We had telepacks. I worked with Dan. I worked with a few people in this room. Tim, it's crazy. Tim shows up a week before I'm ready to leave here, and here's Tim. Tim was a mechanical engineer on some of the things. You did software. Frank G, he was there. He did software. All right, Laura, yeah, right. So we're there, and then then Larry Safer comes along and says, I'm going to sell the business. So boop. Most of you people went down the street with CA to McKay. And I was patient monitoring, so I ended up staying with MindRay, which is the Chinese company that bought the patient monitoring stuff. So I was there a year, and then I got laid off from there. So I ended up getting a job at a lighting company as a test engineer, setting up tests for newly made products and stuff, and they were trying to get the contracts for all the buildings in New York City to turn them over from regular lights with fluorescent lighting into LED lighting. It would save a lot of energy, and so they were trying. That was the big they were trying to get. Well, the project really wasn't managed well, and they ended up canceling the project, and I was laid off for the 4th time. Bingo. So now I'm looking for a job, and of course you go back and start going, well, what about McKay? I go, hey, I see tech support job. I go, I applied. Mark Rappaport has me sets up an interview. I go to his office, hires me on the spot. On the spot. I'm like, what? Wow. So I ended up working with Carl again and Frank Pasillo, and I was a tech support person, and it was interesting because you'd sit there, and Bob Cowblind as well. And we'd sit there, and when the phone rang, you didn't know what you were going to get. Because we were trained on lots of products, the MCP products, the HL20, the heater cooler, the Cardio Help, which is a portable heart-lung machine, and all of the CS100, CS300, Cardio 6. So when the phone rang, you didn't know what they were going to ask. Oftentimes people would have the thing alarming. And I got a headset on. I go, this is tech. I go, shut that off. He goes, I wanted to show you what we're doing. Yeah, well, guess what? So anyway, it was very rewarding because oftentimes there would be a problem that I would start talking to the person on Monday, tell them to go do something. They'd go back on a Wednesday and say, hey, it got better, but it's doing this now. Okay, I tell them to do this. Okay, Friday, you call up, everything's working great. So when you left, you felt like, hey, I did something. It's good, right? Then they came along and said, we're going to change, and we're going to move you to Wayne, and we're not going to offer tech support anymore. Well, what am I going to do? Well, you're going to answer the phone and basically get in touch with their rep. So I'm being a phone operator? Come on. So I went to see Nancy Michael, and I said, Nancy, I used to be in engineering tech with patient monitoring. I could do better than this. Isn't there something you can set me up that's better than this? Let me work on it. Well, guess what? She talks to Brian, she talks to Bob T, right? And mentions me. And like 2 weeks went by, and I'm like, this ain't gonna work. I don't want to answer the phone. It's not gonna be challenging. It's gonna be like, sorry, I'm in trouble. You know, I don't want to do that. So 2 weeks went by, and these guys popped up and went, we have an interview with you. All right. So we go there, we sit in Bob's office, three of us, and I explained the same thing I'm saying to you. I could do better than this. You knew I was a patient monitoring guy. And they're like, okay. And Bob goes, and if this don't happen, you're gonna leave, right? I go, probably, yeah. So, thankfully, you, and that's what I say, thank you, you and Bob took me on and said, we'll make you a term employee. And I was a permanent, and then you a regular employee, and you said, is that okay with you? I said, yeah. What's the difference? What's the difference? Term or not? I'm still there. Okay, let's do it. So I did, and I think it worked out well. In a few years, maybe Tammy did, made me a regular employee again. I knew I had a lot I could show you and do, and I just needed that break, and you gave it to me, and thank you, both of you, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, and then, so like, we moved from there, we came here, I did spend a brief time in the NRC, and that got a little bit like back at the service, it's the same thing again and again. I thought it'd be more in-depth, like troubleshooting, and it really wasn't. So thankfully, Mike Puma and Tammy brought me back, and I'm grateful again for that. Thank you. I think this is really where I belong, you know, right? So, you know, I've enjoyed working for Dave Scope and McKay Genniga, a place that makes products that help save lives. When I worked at Singer, I worked on missiles that blew people up. You know, it's a needed thing, but there's a lot more reward, especially if you have a relative who has been sick and you can relate. You know, Hamdi mentioned about when his baby was born, there was a ventilator, it was a McKay or Genniga ventilator, right? So sooner or later, these kind of things touch people's lives. So it's nice to know you're kind of doing that. You know, you're helping somebody who goes to the hospital, oh, I hope. And there's hope. They do it. It works, you know? So it's nice to know we're doing this, you know? I know it's a lot of work. We're really nose to the grind wheel, especially lately, but we all talk about it, and it's true. It's rewarding to work for a company that's helping people. So at this time, you know, I'd like to apologize for anybody here who I've kind of insulted in some way. You know I can be good. You know, recently I dated a woman who was a psychologist. No, not that kind of psychologist. I know, but all kidding aside, there's nothing wrong with psychotherapy, but that's not her forte. Her forte was called an IO psychologist, which is an industrial organizational psychologist. These are the people that evaluate high-end people who are going to be CEOs, and they can detect things about people. So I said, so you're going to analyze me? I haven't even started. I'm like, So anyway, I did take a test, a Myers-Briggs test, Anybody can. It's free. It's a quiz. You just answer a few questions. And there are 16 personality types. I don't know if you've heard of this. And I'm a protagonist. If you look that up, it fits me perfectly. I don't know, these tests really do it. You know, that's true. I also been told I have a high EQ, which is emotional quotient. I didn't even know this existed. And now that explains a lot. Now I have to stop and say to myself, I know I run hot. I'm enthusiastic, and also, if something doesn't go my way, I know I can easily. So I have to watch it. But if you've seen this behavior of you, you know it. You've seen it. I'm sorry if I did that. Honestly, truthfully, I'm sorry if I did. Okay, please accept that. Thanks everyone who's here, who I've worked with, and those who are not here today, who couldn't come today. It's been a great journey. 43 years. This is probably the place I've spent most time. I spent almost 20 years here now. So this is really, it's like a second family. You know, you work 8 hours or 9 hours with the people you work with. You spend most of the time with the people here than you do almost with your family. So, you know, a lot of people here, you are my second family in a way, you know. We see each other every day, you know. I make you laugh. You get mad at me. I know. I know, you should. But hopefully it's more laughs than, I try to keep it light. I try, like my mom was always look at the better way, smile, like laugh, get over it. So I try to do that. Again, Brian, thank you for bringing me on board. Tammy, again, thanks for this wonderful party, time to get together and say these nice words. Seb, again, thank you for having this for me today. And I'll leave you with this. And for those who get it, you get it. If not, look it up. The love you take is equal to the love you make. Peace and love, everybody.